Hey guys, so today I'm going to show you how to work two problems from our homework. These problems are really long, so I'm going to have to write kind of small, and I'll be erasing and writing again because it's a lot of steps. And I have a notebook here so I don't forget steps, hopefully. But the first problem is 4w squared plus 6w plus 1 equals 0. And for this one, we're just going to complete the square. So the first thing you want to do is divide, or I'm going to move the 1 over to the other side first before I divide. I prefer to do that so that you can eliminate an extra step. If this is a negative, it affects the signs and it's just easier for me. Then you want to divide everything by the first term's numerical coefficient, which is 4. So w squared plus 6 over 4 times w equals negative 1 over 4. So, after you've done this, you can reduce this when you go into the next step, which is multiplying the coefficient of the second of the middle term with times 1/2, and then you square it. So it'll look like the reduced fraction, which is 3/2, times 1/2, and then the whole thing squared. So that's going to be 3/4 squared. So then you're going to add this to both sides. So you will copy this, which is 3/2, and then you're going to add the square of this, which is 9/16 to both sides. So negative 1/4 plus 9/16. Then you just want to combine your terms. So w squared plus 3/2 w plus 9/16 equals, and so to add these, you're going to have to get a common denominator, which in this case is 16, and it's just going to be 4 times 4 is 16, and negative 1 times 4 is negative 4. That's really small, but it's negative 4 over 16 plus 9 over 16 will be 5 over 16. Then you want to factor this, which right now is a perfect square trinomial. So you will take the square root of the first term and then the square root of the second term, which is 3/4 up here, and then you'll take the sign of the term before it's squared. So like if this was negative, you'd want it to be the negative 3/4, not positive 3/4. Equals 5/16. Then you want to take the square root of both sides. So that's going to be, I'm going to go over here, that's going to be w plus 3/4 equals, and you can't take the square root of 5, it's not a whole number, so I'm just going to take the square root of the denominator to rationalize the denominator, and it's going to be square root of 5 over 4. So then you're solving for w, so you're going to subtract 3/4 from both sides, and when you take the square root of something, you have a positive and a negative possibility, so this is actually going to be positive negative square root of 5 over 4. So your two final answers will be w equals positive square root of 5 minus 3 over 4, and w equals negative square root of 5 minus 3 over 4. And those will be your two final answers. The second problem, we have to find a bunch of stuff and then graph it all. So, the first thing we have to find is the axis of symmetry. So the formula for the axis of symmetry is negative b over 2a, which is based off of the basic function. So negative b is going to be the coefficient of the second term, and a is going to be the coefficient of the first term. So to substitute into this formula, it'll be negative 1 over 2 positive 1. So that's going to reduce to two negatives make a positive. Positive 1 over 2 times 1, which is 2, so 1/2. So 1/2 is going to be your axis of symmetry. Then the next thing we have to find is the vertex. So the vertex is based off of the same negative b over 2a formula, and then you take the function of negative b over 2a. So the negative b over 2a, we already found that, is 1/2. Then we're going to take the function of that based off of this function. So you're going to substitute in 1/2 for x. And then solve. So you're going to square the first term, so you'll square both parts, which will be 1/4 minus 1/2 minus 2. So now you need a common denominator so you can solve. So the common denominator is going to be 4. So multiply the 1/2, you multiply the denominator by 2, so you multiply the numerator by 2. And the same for the whole number. You multiply the denominator of 1 by 2, so you multiply the numerator by 2, which will be 8. So the answer will be 1 minus 2, which is negative 1, minus 8 is negative 9 over 4. And that's going to be your y coordinate. So the vertex itself is going to be, let's see, right up here. The vertex itself is going to be 1/2 negative 9/4. Okay. The next part that we're going to do are finding the x and y intercepts. So the y-intercept is going to be found by solving for 0. So you substitute 0 for x. In every case, that's going to equal this term, because no matter what it's multiplied by, no matter what the coefficient is, you're multiplying it by 0, so the end result is going to be the only whole number that does not have an x attached to it. So in this case, the y-intercept is going to be 0, negative 2. The x-intercepts are found by setting the whole function equal to 0. So you would have x squared minus x minus 2 equals 0. And then you solve for x. So to do that, we're going to use the complete the square method. So you will move the third term over to the other side. So x squared minus x equals 2. And then you would divide everything by the coefficient of the first term, which in this case is 1, so it stays the same. The next step is to take the second term's coefficient and multiply it 1/2 by 1/2 and square it all. So that would be negative 1 over what it was divided by, which is 1, times 1/2, and then squared. So that's going to equal negative 1/2 squared. Then you're going to add this to both sides of the equation. So you will have x squared minus x plus 1, the square of 1, negative 1 is 1, and the square of 2 is 4. And then you'll do the same to the other side, 2 plus 1/4. So the next thing you want to do is combine your like terms. Move it up here, and you will have x squared minus x plus 1/4 equals and you're going to want to find a common denominator, which is 4. So if you multiply the denominator by 4, you multiply the numerator by 4, which will be 8 fourths. And 8 fourths, let's see, right up here, 8 fourths plus 1 fourth equals 9 fourths. So you'll have x squared minus x plus 1 fourth equals 9 fourths. Then you want to factor this trinomial, and it's a perfect square trinomial, so you will take the square of the first term and the square root of the first term and the square root of the last term, and then you'll take the sign of what was in parentheses over here, which is a negative, and then you'll square all of that. And just move this down, 9 over 4. Then you want to take the square root, so take the square root of both sides. You'll have x minus 1/2 equals 3 over 2, because you can take the square root of both of those. Then you will solve for x, so you just add 1/2 to both sides. X equals 4 over 2. And whenever you take the square root, there's positive and negative possibilities, so you'll have to have positive, negative, 3 over 2. So when you add the 1, it'll be, if it's a positive, it'll be 4 over 2, which will be x equals 2. If it's a negative 3, it'll be negative 3 plus 1 is negative 2 over 2, which will be x equals negative 1. And those are your two x coordinates. So those will look like, or x intercepts. And those will look like 2, 0, and negative 1, 0. The step that we're going to do is graph. So we have all of the pieces that we just found by working out the equation, and now we're going to put it into a parabola. So the first thing I like to mark is the vertex. The vertex is 1/2 negative 9 fourths. To make it easier to see where it is on the graph, I'm going to convert that to a mixed number, which is negative 2 and 1/4. So the vertex is going to be positive x, 1/2, and then you go down negative 1, 2, and 1/4. And that is your vertex. The next thing are going to be the two x-intercepts. So the first one is 2, 0, which is 1, 2, and then doesn't go up or down, so 0 right there. And then the next one is negative 1, 0, so you're going to go negative 1 and then 0, so it's right there. So then just connect the dots as straight a line as you can. And you can see that your x or your y-intercept is negative 2 right there. And then you have the axis of symmetry is the only thing that you don't really mark, but the axis of symmetry is 1/2, and you can see that that is a straight line down the 1/2 of on the x-axis.